Now, I'm currently having or looking forward to another interesting conversation. And my guest joining me tonight is Vuledzani Gloria Dangale, who is an accomplished author and mental health advocate. Now, tonight, through her writing and advocacy work, she'll be shining light using examples as to how individual stories can drive understanding and spark meaningful change. Good evening, Ms. Dangale. Jazakallah. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Now, can you give us an insight in terms of the journey that led you to being an advocate for mental health? What truly sparked that path for you?
For me, it's close to home. Um, my daughter, who's now 19 years old, when she was around 7 years old, she expressed that she did, had thoughts of unaliving herself, as an
Wow.
example. Now, that's something that's not spoken about. Now, prior to that, had never heard of depression in children.
Okay.
I think often we think the worst when we think about depression. It has to be in adults, and you need to be a grown up with bills and responsibilities. What we also don't know is that, and which I didn't realize at the time,
Yeah.
is that low dopamine and low serotonin can happen to anyone. It can happen to children as well. The latest stats on the youngest child who's unalived themselves
Yeah.
is a 4-year-old. So clearly, there is, a problem there. So for me, it's going through that journey and walking that journey with her in silence,
Yeah.
not sharing with anyone, because when I tried to share, people around me did not understand either. I was grappling with that as well, trying to understand what is this, why does it happen in children, when does it happen in children, and trying to understand where does this come from.
Yeah.
And from there, I realized that there's very little resources that talks about children and how it manifests in children, which generally it's feelings of sadness,
Yeah.
feelings of worry. And because we don't talk about it enough, we have not developed the tools to regulate our emotions or to learn to say it's actually okay to feel sad.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your sadness. Let's talk about what's making you to feel sad. It's okay to worry. Let's talk about what are you worried about?
Yeah.
And that's basically where the books came from. I wrote the books that I wish I had when we were going through this journey. So I wrote Mashudu's Magical Superpowers for the 7-year-old Mashudu. I wish I had this book to sit down with her and read with her and inspire her that this is actually her superpower. And let's find a way to work with it.
And you mentioned something that is quite interesting, and I think seeing that you have lived the experience, and without delving too much into reliving that very devastating outbreak from your child, I want to find out from you is what were your first thoughts, and how did you now get to the understanding part versus, culturally and also looking at the time? It's always like, you don't have bills to worry about. Why are you depressed? Versus how you then assisted through the books, through engagement, in us understanding the fact that it affects anybody.
Well, it took me years from the time she was 7 until she was 13 for me to actually understand and to accept.
Yeah.
Because as a parent, our kids are perfect.
Yeah.
And I think between the age of 7 and 13, I overcompensated because I thought it's something I can fix. I just need to make you happy. Let's do things that will make you happy without realizing that it's actually an illness. I can do all the things that that will make her happy, as an example. It's a chemical imbalance that needs to be addressed through medical professionals and in some instances through medication. And if I may, the way I now describe it is it's like someone with diabetes.
Yeah.
Right? So you could manage it through diet and exercise with early intervention.
Yeah.
Sometimes diet and exercise will not work for a type 1 diabetic, as an example. You need to be on medication. And for me, now I'm able to explain it better in a way that doesn't carry stigma and it's easily understood.
Ms. Dangale, you have a background in finance, and now you write about mental health, which are just vast and worlds apart. How do you then use your experiences from finance to sort of drive this conversation that is necessary? Because after all, lack of finance does cause stress.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that we don't tend to see, where we're like, you're rich, why do you have mental issues? You're poor, okay, well, you should have mental issues.
Yeah.
But how would you best explain the fact that your professional experiences have, in whatever way they have, influenced your advocacy of work and writing?
My professional experience actually enabled me to write the books. I think something that you're mentioning now, mental health affects everyone across the spectrum. It's not a poor person's disease or
Yeah.
a rich person's disease, which sometimes, there's some stigma and
Yeah.
narratives that we build around that. But it's my background in finance has actually helped me to plan for how do I actually put this out.
Okay.
It allowed me to have the network where I could actually bring out the books and launch to my peers and use my network to try and get the message out there.
Huh. Now, you highlighted something that we are all trying to rid our societies of, which is stigma and discrimination, because I think that is what that continues to perpetuate the issues that we tend to have in countries and nations and just globally, where you find men who feel so scared to be vulnerable, and you find kids who are will never dare to tell their parents, I'm depressed. And as you are engaging me tonight, I want to find out from you, what are some of the biggest misconceptions and stigmas surrounding mental health that you have encountered in your experience?
Sure, some of them are quite heartbreaking. It's just, go to church or, go consult a traditional healer. There's a lack of understanding and lack of awareness around it. Change your diet, become vegan. It's all the hormones in the eggs and the meats. And I mean, just to give an example, my daughter lost her friends because they could not understand hypomania and how those symptoms, show. And instead, they said, "Well, we actually don't want to be your friend anymore. You are possessed, and therefore, absolutely." So she lost all her friends because even the parents could not understand what was going on. And through that, I mean, for me, the stigma is the reason why people don't come out and talk about it. And for my daughter and I, we thought, this is our Me Too movement. We need to normalize talking about it. We need to educate each other. And in educating each other, we also acknowledge that we don't have the words to use for serotonin.
Yes.
Movenda. Such word does not exist in my own
Exist.
language. I don't know about you, but they don't. But in English, when you say that I have low serotonin and dopamine, it's more acceptable. There's no stigma on that. So there's actually, a gap both in the education department, in the Department of Health, as well as, arts and culture. We need to create words that are more constructive so that people who need help do not need to suffer in silence. They can come out and say, me too. I too am struggling and I need help. Whereas currently, people are hiding in silence because when they come out, what is the word that we know for anything related to mental illness?
Crazy.
We are lying. When actually, no. In fact, if you see someone with a mood disorder, they are just fine and they thrive in society.
Yeah.
But also understand that when it's not taken care of, when there's no intervention, whether it's medication or whether it's, through therapy as an example, there will be the highs and lows. And how do you actually manage the highs and lows?
I love how that answer was so powerful, because I thought maybe that one part, because I think my colleague and I were having a conversation to say, I think also another contributing factor is, if you sit with your grandmother and say, I'm depressed, how do you then say it in vernac? Because
Yes.
the idea of depressed is like, what does that even mean? Where does that even
Absolutely.
stand in our current society or previous society in which they grew up in? We're all about persevering. We're all about, working through hardships, but not understanding the impact it might have on a mental
Absolutely.
aspect. Now, you've wrote Mashudu's Magical Superpowers, and I'm loving her name because it reminds me of the Miss South Africa, to help children understand, and manage their feelings at that. Because as you mentioned earlier on, a lot of kids go through these, but they cannot articulate it to their parents or even help their parents understand what they're feeling. Can you tell us in terms of in what ways do you believe books like this can help promote mental health awareness amongst children, and how parents as well as educators can now start using this book to now driving that open, encouraging environments in terms of it's okay to feel what you're feeling, validating their feelings?
So for me, the first part was finding age appropriate words, because for a 5-year-old we did not call it depression because I did not believe that depression exists in children.
Yeah.
So you'll notice I said understanding feelings of sadness and worry. That's depression and anxiety.
Oof.
So I wanted to find words that are non-threatening to parents and also non-threatening to kids, so that parents and kids can read the story together. And hopefully through Mashudu's story, they can learn, firstly, they can make it easier for them and the kids to start talking about how was your day, how did you feel, what happened, because feelings are quite important. Our children are actually acting based on their feelings.
Yes.
So we need to normalize, we need to learn to give these feelings names. Because once we can name it, there is power in that. Then we know that, we sort of are more in control of it instead of it controlling us.
Right.
And I moved further to the teenager, because Mashudu grew from a 7-year-old to a teen. And teen years and puberty do not mix,
Yeah.
but they happen all at the same time. And for me, for the teenager, I could see that, they have low attention span. So I wrote Brighter Days Ahead. And Brighter Days Ahead is exactly to remind them that while today feels like this is the worst day ever and things can never get better, there will always be brighter days ahead. And in Brighter Days Ahead, again, Mashudu and her friend Rendani, they navigate this world now of depression and anxiety, because now they know it as depression and anxiety. And I give them tools. I also give their parents tools to say, how do you advocate for your child? Because I didn't have that. Who do you speak to? How do you speak to your teachers to make sure that your child is better supported at school? And finally, a parent's journey was me just writing my version of our experience, with the hope that there is a parent out there who might think they are alone in this. Hopefully, they can join our Me Too movement.
And hope we all hope for that, Ms. Dangale. Now, my other question now is, in your opinion, can books like yours contribute to finding a solution?
Absolutely. I think through these books already, the demand in schools, I've been to schools, there are other people who have also taken, hit the call
Yeah.
and have taken the books to the schools. And it's through these books that the parents are also realizing that some of the kids in their classrooms, actually they're not naughty. It's children who are struggling. They're able to speak to the parents to say, please think about it. Maybe, have a child speak to a psychologist, etc. So they've sparked a conversation that would have been difficult for us to start.
Wow. This is quite lovely. And I'm loving it's promising. It's giving promising. And I think with that being said, what would you say or what do you believe are the most significant barriers to reducing stigma and raising awareness around mental health in South Africa?
The fact that we don't have the right language to use, that's the first thing. If we want to address it, we need to start there. Secondly, we don't talk enough about it. I think like everything else, I remember back in the 80s, nobody wanted to hear anything about HIV
Oh,
as an
yes.
example. But things have changed. So the same with mental health. The more we talk about it, the more we normalize talking about it. And also, sometimes we want to see a person and say, oh, okay, so actually it's not something that I need to be afraid of. As a parent, if my child needs help, I don't need to hide it. We can actually seek the help that we need. We can get the support that we need. But it starts with having the right language that we use to describe mental illness.
And just circling back to your response, I'm just going to ask you a very loaded question because
Yes.
unfortunately we've run out of time. The first is, there's this conversation now of the fear of normalizing the mental issues that people feel or believe that once it's normalized, then people can easily say, I'm depressed, even if they're not in the spectrum of depression.
Yeah.
And what's your take on that, or what's your response to that? And most lastly, what message would like to share with our viewers at home, or just offer to our viewers at home who also might be struggling with their own mental challenges or supporting a loved one through that journey?
So, on the first question, I guess that's one thing that even organizations are grappling with.
Yeah.
It's when is it a mental illness and when is a person actually acting out or really taking advantage of something that other people are living with on a daily basis.
Yeah.
I think we hope and pray that we have an ethical society, but like everything else, you are going to have people who are opportunistic, and you can't really, take them out of society. That's going to happen. But for me, then going to your second question, because we're out of time. My message really is there is help out there. Early intervention makes a huge difference. I think had we sought help earlier on, probably things wouldn't have been as worse as they were. So absolutely take early intervention. Normalize having a psychologist as a family. The same way that you have a general practitioner. Sometimes your kids don't want to talk to you. They want to talk to a medical professional. So let's normalize that. And teachers, we know you already have your hands full, but if you do see something in class, please reach out to the parent and we can all work together as a community.
And where can we find your beautiful solution-based books?
All right, I have a website. It is www.vuledzani.co.za or .com, excuse me. And I can also be reached on 082 486 4177. I do deliver nationally via courier.
Thank you so much, Ms. Dangare, for joining us tonight and really sharing with us your journey and being vulnerable with our viewers at home, and also just offering solutions in terms of how it is important for us to normalize it. After all, it doesn't exist in our vernacular languages, and us continuing to ignore it, or rather terming it as crazy, is what's going to really leave us behind and leave us with a broken society at that. But thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
Viewers at home, that was my amazing guest who shared about her journey, her book, and all things in between. Make sure you do check her out on her website, as well as using her number to get yourself this book. Hopefully it will assist you in some way or form. But that was my guest, Vuledzani Gloria Dangale, who was sharing about all things mental health as an advocate. But for now, let's head over to an ad break. We'll see you just after this.